Welcome to the MYBcast, podcast series devoted to exploring alternatives for self-care through somatic touch therapies of all sorts. We are fascinated with the mind-body connection, and so are the people we talk with. Today, we're continuing our series, Portraits of the Pioneers. Portraits offers an in-depth look at those who have been actively involved in the exploration, development, and practice of somatic touch therapy since its early inception. I'm Anna Marie Bowers, and I'm here with my co-host, Richard Mack. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning, Anna Marie.
Today, we are excited to talk with our guest, Jack Lisken. Welcome, Jack. It's so good to see you again.
Thank you.
Let's start this section with a little bit of talking about your research project that you did at the University of Southern California and kind of bring us up to speed about how that developed from the early days of bringing this into the family practice program and how you got to the point of actually doing a pilot study.
Well, I had been spending quite a lot of time with Milton and Emily in relation to writing the book and also just being with them. And because of Milton's interest in having his work be part of medicine, it occurred to me that the way to make that happen was to do a clinical research project. And so I talked to them about it, and they actually ended up donating. I guess the word is donating. We're putting up some money of their own in order to sponsor a project at USC where I was working. And so with that, we had to develop an appropriate research project and ended up thinking, because I had seen a lot of patients with headache that were sent to me from the neurology department and elsewhere, to doing a study related to chronic headache. And we had to get institutional review and approval for any clinical research project. And we did that. We did a proposal. It was approved. And so I was able to hire an assistant to do a lot of the work of enrolling patients and kind of keeping things in order. And we were able to enroll a number of patients in the project, which was to study the effects of Traeger work on people with chronic headache. That is, people who had had headache for, I think it was at least once a week for 6 months. And there was a control group. There were actually 3 groups. A control group that did not have anything done, a group that had just attention by a physician, and a 3rd group that had Traeger work done. And so we were able to enroll a number of patients from the family medicine in the study, and to collect the data. And there was quality of life that was being, through a questionnaire that was being monitored, also use of medication and frequency and intensity of the headaches. And so we were able to complete the study, have a statistical analysis done, and determined that Traeger work was effective in improving quality of life and also in reducing the amount of medication, significantly reducing the amount of medication that these patients were taking for their headache. So there was a positive clinical outcome that was statistically significant. We sent through one of the faculty members did most of the work in writing up the paper, which we sent to medical journals We were not able to get published in a regular medical journal, but we were published in a journal called Alternative Therapies in Health and Medicine. So this was in September, October of 2004. And so that study is there. It had positive clinical outcomes and was a controlled clinical study with, was a valid study. As far as I know, it's the only one of that type that has been produced using, Traeger work. There have been other more or less exact, I suppose, studies or exacting studies, but this is the only one that I'm aware of.
You had so many specific things that you did with this study, all of the specific things that you measured, all your specific protocols and everything. It would be an ideal study to try to replicate, which is what excited me about your particular study. Is this is one that could easily be replicated. Just take your template and produce this in another area. Did they get Traeger sessions on a regular basis? Was this like just as part of just for the general public, just in general, not going through the whole study, but did the clients come on a timed schedule? Was it just something that was they got one of these 3 treatments when they happened to come, or over what period of time? Do you remember any of that?
I believe we did 6 sessions on a weekly basis.
Okay, got it. That's kind of what
Yeah.
I was thinking too.
Yeah.
Okay. This would
And-
be a really exciting one, I think, to try to replicate. Go ahead,
Well,
Richard.
that was the suggestion at the end of the paper, was that, that this was framed as a pilot study and that it needed to be replicated on a larger basis.
You had 33 patients, so that's a reasonable size.
Yeah.
That's a really reasonable size. It's not 5. So
Yeah,
go ahead,
right.
Richard. I think Richard had a question.
Yeah, I do. I'd just like to hear a little bit more about the actual study itself. So, the client would come in 6 times a week for a
No,
Traeger?
1 time a week for 6 weeks.
6
Okay, okay. And how long was each session?
About an hour.
Okay. And was the session pretty much the same type of session, or did you just flow to whatever you
No,
felt at the moment?
same types of session as I normally did, which encompass the whole body, but with people with headache, there was a lot of work on the head and neck and upper body, shoulders, chest, and etc. But it would basically be a full session, but with a little bit of concentration in certain areas.
I'm also curious because you controlled for the practitioner by being the only practitioner.
Yeah.
Which is some of the confounding variables that can be possible in these kind of studies is if you have different practitioners potentially working in different ways, even though there's a similar protocol, like designing this study. When I think about this would just be like overwhelming. How do you design a protocol that multiple people could do without making that a confounding variable?
Yeah. On the other hand, it's a limitation too, because then was it
Yes,
just me, or is it the
right.
work?
Exactly. So it raises so many interesting opportunities, I think. We are working with we're working with encouraging practitioners to write case reports as an initial idea about getting them to be able to do a pilot study, do a research study. So we're starting at the bottom of the pyramid of research with just writing what happened in a session. Let's just do a case report. So you went straight to this, and it
Yeah.
fascinates me that you were able to do that, that it showed statistical significance, that it's easily replicable. I just am, thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Well, it was, it made sense to do it because in medicine, if you want to get approval for something or acceptance of it, you do research. You do controlled research to validate whatever hypothesis it is that you have, and so that's the way in medicine.
Yeah.
I have to
Did,
take this opportunity to give a plug to the Foundation for Somatic Touch because that's exactly what we're focused on.
mhm.
And although we started with Traeger Works or Traeger Approach, we feel that all the touch modalities need an opportunity to state their case. And we're a 501(c)(3). We're looking for donations, and we're hoping to get some donations from big organizations that are focusing on MS, CP, the various neurological disorders, but not limited to that, to bring this work forward and follow in your footsteps, Jack. That's really what we're trying to do. And unbeknownst to me, before this interview with you, didn't realize that you're the father of the foundation.
in many ways, in many ways. So do you have any stories about clients that you would like to share, or even your own changing experiences that happened as a result of this work?
Well, I know that one of the early uh, referrals that I got was for Parkinson's disease. I had actually sought out the doctor who specialized in that because I knew that Milton had done work with someone with Parkinson's disease. And, it was fascinating in many ways because the amount of rigidity in the body was just so far beyond anybody else that you work with when you're working with Parkinson's disease. And what was fascinating is that even making this very slightest change, was gave a lot of relief to the person. So you felt like, you just have done very little, and yet they experience it as a really great relief for them. And of course, the other thing, as with what Milton noticed when the person that he had worked first worked with Parkinson's was that when they were watching a tennis match and he saw their head move from side to side easily. So the whole element of using rhythm to allow for movement where it's otherwise very, very restricted was something that I taught when I was working with patients with Parkinson's, and allowing them to move by establishing a rhythm, a back and forth rhythm, and then getting into that rhythm to allow them to break with people with severe Parkinson's, it's hard for them to initiate a first step.
Yes.
They get stuck. And
Yes.
so I was able to use the rhythm of movement to help them break that stuckness and allow them to move forward. So it was very challenging work because you feel like you can't break through the armor of their body, and yet there were changes. And I remember I would see this one man who was a dentist, and eventually did some sessions with him at his home because it was hard for him to come in. And uh, his wife really, he and his wife really appreciating that work. So yeah, the work with Parkinson's patients and patients with headache was was very gratifying because you could see the change. I'd have a headache patient. I would talk to people. This is a woman. I remember a woman with chronic headache that came in, and she was telling me about her day, and somehow it came up that she would not take the time during the course of her work day to even go to the bathroom. And this was the her mode of working, and so that you can imagine what she would. She's holding in her urine and she's holding in everything else as well. And so, yeah, it was very gratifying to work with people with headache and see them loosen up and find the connection between what was happening in their body and what was happening with their problems with headache.
Yeah. I'm really interested in your use of the word rhythm because Traeger, as a somatic touch profession, is one of the ones that does seem to use a rhythm of the client as a part of the work. And so I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about where else that might be applicable besides Parkinson's, or where else you've maybe seen that be useful for a client.
Well, I would spend a lot of time after a session. I would oftentimes, or even sometimes maybe even instead of a session, I would take the person outside and just have them walk. And so the rhythm, that rhythm, and the allowing the body to let flow rhythmically, the arms and legs together, and just teaching people how to walk. I'd spend a lot. I'd go outside the medical building. There was a grassy area, and we would just walk back and forth. And I would show people how to develop a relaxed and rhythmic walk. And of course, rhythm was so much a part of Milton's learning of the work and the way he worked with people in his own, from acrobatics to boxing to dance. All of those things were rhythm is involved, and so it was very much a part of his work. And of course, when you look at Traeger work, how he moves the body, it's that's also very much they're very much rhythmic movement. And so, yeah, so I think that's an incredibly important part of the work.
Fascinating. Fascinating. I have to say, doing these interviews with people like yourself, I'm a practitioner now, but I'm a newbie compared to what you guys experienced. And where this work is going, based upon the foundation of which was created upon, it's this is it's hard to believe that this is not moving into the new medicine that we're going to be experiencing going forward. I mean, we're in a different world. Neurological disorders, yes, there's a lot of that, but now there's a new thing that's happening, anxiety and tension that's happening because of the state of the world. That's creating a whole new sense of neurological disorders that are happening. And this work is a good foundation to treat that. I'd like to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, each generation has different problems. I'm I'm getting old, and so I'm out of touch in a way with the world as experienced by people of younger generations. They have a lot of challenges. The whole increase in autism, and I'm interested in how an autistic person would experience this kind of work, and yeah, so I don't even know the applications that are possible, and all the time we spend on screens away from the natural rhythm, the natural world, and natural rhythms of the world. And yeah, I think there's many unexplored explorations, because I think each generation has its own somatic challenges, based on the world that they're encountering.
Sure. Life is always in context, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So for yourself personally, my question about your voice, you said something in the very beginning about a voice coach noticing the tension you held in your body. And so I'm curious, as a result of the work on yourself, Did your voice change? Did you notice anything different in terms of the voice tension, the voice body tension connection, or anything around that, especially for singers? Or have you worked with anybody who was a singer?
Yeah, not so much, but I see a great application there. And yeah, it made a change for me, not the Reiki work, because that may have been a change, but I didn't really know what it felt like to be at ease until I got the Traeger work. And so, yeah, so I think, it opened up my voice, it made things easier. I was still no good because I'm anxious. So I get anxious. So I'm not much of a performer because of that. So, but yeah, it did make a difference for me in in everything. It was a whole different way of being that it came into the way I taught, into the way I directed my work as an administrator, working with faculty. Yeah, it really permeated every aspect of my life.
Yeah.
I'd like to amplify that a little bit more in the sense of autism. I have worked with a fair amount of autistic children, and the usual complaint that they're coming in, their parents are there, is that the kid just can't perform in class. He's taking over. He's just wanting too much attention and so forth. And I've had some pretty good success with having these children dial it down, dial down that need, that tension that's inside them. And what it really boils down to is just having them feel themselves inside their body, even to a place that it's so simple, like just taking their leg and dropping it onto a pillow and having that feel that sensation of gravity and just feeling the things that happen in their body that they don't have to be in control of. That little piece has made some significant difference to some children that I've worked with. So,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Uh, have you had to then overcome, because sometimes that personal contact can be too much for autistic people. So you have to get through that in some way as well. And so I imagine that the touch can be threatening
Mhm.
uh, at first, but I could definitely imagine a lot of utility for this kind of work.
mm.
Mhm.
And there's also a sense of taking them out of the sympathetic state in the autonomic nervous system and letting them experience that shift from sympathetic to parasympathetic. And you're
Uh,
right, in the first couple of sessions with working with these children, quite challenging to get them just to be still, that you could even put your hands on them. But once they start to feel that sensation of letting go, and you can actually see it in their eyes, they just literally they announce that, okay, I let go of that need to fight or flight, and they're into receiving. And it's in that state, the more that they can experience their body, that was the thing that created the changes. And the impact was significant. The teachers are reporting the kids are being able to perform in class without being a class interruption. So there's something to that for sure.
Sounds like a good opportunity for another pilot study. Yeah. So circle back a little bit. Anything ever surprise you, Jack, in this work with clients? Did any stories about something that kind of was a surprise how it was effective or not?
well, either surprising me or well, I think more often the people that I worked with was
We're
surprised
surprised.
because their expectations, they're coming into a medical setting. Um, they have never had this work. They don't. Uh, and then I would, sit and talk with them at the beginning, and just let things come up, and they were like, what is this? Why am I crying? uh, you know, the expectations, people didn't know what to expect. And so I think they were amazed that so much came up for them um, during the course of even talking about it, and then either before or after the session, and then being surprised by how much feeling came up because they weren't anticipating that. I think they were more often surprised than I was because I was more familiar with that, or
Sure.
it made perfect sense to me, but not necessarily to them.
Sure. Because the mind and the body are connected, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah.
Along those same lines, I'd like to maybe dive a little bit deeper into the world of Dr. Peter Levine was a good example of bringing the thought of psychotherapy and in the body together, because this is really what's happening here is we're using the body and we're using the receptor of the soft tissue, which is one of the major receptors of the human body, in how to literally change movement patterns and reaction patterns inside the brain. We're just scratching the surface with this work. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, Jack.
Well, of course, that's what Milton always said. We're just scratching the surface, and that the muscles are dumb. That the connection he was making was with the mind, and that what happened with the body was came as a result of that connection, both his connection with the mind of the person that he was working with, and then that person's connection of their mind with their own body. So that's what he was all about. And he saw that early on. He said it over and over again. And the depth of it doesn't always, people didn't always understand the depth of what he meant when he said that. But that's what he was always talking about. And what it did, the first term for the Traeger work was psychophysical integration, right? That was an early term, and and that was an accurate descriptive term.
Mhm, mhm. Definitely something that plays into what's going on in the world right now. I know there's a lot of people that don't like the word trauma, but basically what we have in trauma is a trap. The brain is focusing on something that is an unresolved trauma loop, and it's holding that tension in the body. And if it gets triggered, the brain goes right back to the moment that trauma it was induced, and it comes through. Um, I'd just like to share just a brief. I have a relatively new client that I started working with. That she's a young lady who experienced a traumatic event in the operating room. She was having a gallstone removed, and she flatlined. She went out, and coming out of that, she lost her voice, she lost her movement, everything. Um, I've been working with her, just started working with her a couple of sessions now, and I'm finding that bringing her back to that area that she's blocked out because of whatever, that trauma, and having her feel that. And you mentioned it, people start crying and weeping on the table. Very common. It's part of that emotional release, but it's allowing that trauma cycle to come through in the brain and actually come to a place of completion. And when that completion is done, that trauma is no longer holding them hostage. Very important work.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Sounds like you have some experience working with trauma as well, Jack.
Yeah, I wouldn't say specifically that, but I think it's it's sort of embedded.
Yes,
There's
can
many.
be. Yes.
A traumatic event can be one event. It can be a process that just repeats itself over and over again without being known consciously. Habits of tension, habits of holding back, holding in. Those things are kind of mini. You might say they're mini traumas. That are just kept going by repetition, that are completely unconscious. So, going back to what Milton first saw with me when he said something is pushing me. What is it that's driving me? Um, uh, I don't know what the source of that was, but I know how to pull myself back from it. I've learned over time how to put myself back into my body and not be that pushing forward where I'm unconsciously being manipulated by something in my past, but am able to come back and say, okay, all right, uh, here I am. This is coming back to center. So I don't know. I think I wouldn't say I've specifically worked with people with trauma, but I think trauma is a spectrum as well.
Yeah, and that self-awareness that you gain over time as you start to become more aware of how your body feels can actually be a key in. You can use the mentastics, the self-awareness and movement of your own self.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Come back to center.
Right.
Yeah.
Because sometimes these phrases that, of course, mean a lot to us don't mean a lot to other people. Come back to center might be something that someone would not really understand.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Well, we've come to the end of this session, and Jack, I hope that you would be willing to sit around and do one more episode with us, because I'm
Okay.
loving the topics that you're bringing up. And with that being said, I welcome our audience to join us for more of the MYBcast and Portraits of the Pioneers. We're available on YouTube as well as wherever you obtain your podcasts, your audio podcasts. So until then, we look forward to seeing you next time. Be well.